Before I start writing, I want to flag something. The story you're building closely mirrors real legal financial drama narratives used in YouTube storytelling channels. That's completely fine, but I want to make sure the story is clearly framed as fictional, not true story, to avoid any issues. Looking at the thumbnail you shared, it says True Story. I'd recommend framing the new story as inspired by real experiences rather than a specific person's account, which is standard practice for this genre. With that noted, here's the story. I used to audit other people's financial mistakes for a living. I never thought I'd have to audit my own marriage. For 6 years, I worked as an internal controls analyst at a mid sized insurance company in Columbus, Ohio. My job was finding the gaps, the places where money disappeared quietly, where numbers told one story on paper and something entirely different in practice. I was good at it, patient, methodical. I could sit with a spreadsheet for 4 hours and feel nothing but focus. Then I had my daughter, and my husband suggested I take some time off. Just a year, he said, just to get her settled. She was colicky, then she had ear infections back to back. Then we moved into the house he had picked out in Dublin, a suburb I'd never particularly liked, and 1 year became two, and two became almost four. I told myself it was fine. We had enough. He was doing well. I told myself I was lucky. His name was Aaron. We met in our late 20s at a conference neither of us wanted to attend. He was charming in the specific way that feels like relief. Easy to talk to, quick to laugh, good at making you feel like the most interesting person in the room. He sold commercial real estate. He was very good at it. By the time our daughter turned 3, something had shifted. Not dramatically. Not the way it happens in movies. It was more like a temperature change, a few degrees at a time, over months, until one morning I realized the house felt cold and I couldn't remember when it had started. He stopped asking about my day. He traveled more. He was short with me in ways he would immediately smooth over, so that if I tried to describe it to anyone, I would sound like I was complaining about nothing. He called me sensitive. He said I'd been home too long and had lost perspective. Maybe he was right, I thought. I had been home a long time. The night everything changed, he was at a client dinner. Our daughter had fallen asleep on the couch watching her show, and I carried her to bed, and then I stood in the kitchen for a long time, not doing anything in particular. I opened my laptop to look at our joint checking account, something I did routinely just to track the grocery budget. There was a Venmo transfer I didn't recognize, $340 to someone named, and I'll never forget this, Sunshine Girl, dated 3 weeks earlier. I scrolled back. Another one, 6 weeks before that, 280. I scrolled further. There were 8 transfers over the past 14 months, all different amounts, all to the same contact. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I sat down at the kitchen table and I opened a new spreadsheet, the way I had been trained to do when something didn't add up. I started with what I could see, then I started thinking about what I couldn't. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't confront him the next week. I had learned through years of audit work that the worst thing you can do when you suspect fraud is tip off the subject. You gather first. You organize. You present the full picture. So I gathered. I still had access to our joint accounts, our tax filing login, his business email, which he'd asked me to manage 2 years earlier when he was overwhelmed with a deal and had apparently forgotten to revoke. I didn't read his personal emails. I focused on financials. I pulled 3 years of bank statements. I cross-referenced them against his tax returns, which listed income from his brokerage, a company he co-owned with a partner. I compared reported income to actual deposits. The gap was not small. Over roughly 26 months, approximately $180,000 had moved through accounts I had no knowledge of. Not in one lump sum. In careful increments, $4,000 here, $7,500 there. The kind of pattern designed to stay below the threshold that triggers automatic bank flags. I recognized the technique. I had caught a mid-level manager doing something similar at my old job. He'd been fired and referred to the state AG's office. My husband had done this more carefully, but not carefully enough. I saved everything to an encrypted folder on a personal drive I kept in my car. I didn't touch the files on the home computer. I made no changes to any accounts. I went about my days, making lunch, taking our daughter to her swim class at the Sawmill Athletic Club, answering errands texts about dinner and dry cleaning. And I felt, for the first time in a long time, like myself again. I contacted a family law attorney in late February. Her name was Miss Aldridge, and she had an office off of Broad Street and the kind of reputation you find when you ask the right people quietly. I had called 3 attorneys before her. She was the one who, after I laid out what I had found, leaned back in her chair and said, "You've done a significant portion of my job already." She advised me on what to preserve and how. She told me that Ohio is an equitable distribution state, meaning marital assets are divided fairly, not necessarily 50-50, but based on what each party contributed, and what each party contributed, and what each party concealed. She said the hidden accounts would matter enormously. She said his attempt to undervalue marital assets in anticipation of a divorce could be characterized as financial misconduct, which courts took seriously. She also told me to secure health insurance for my daughter before I filed anything. That detail stopped me cold. Our daughter was on Aaron's employer-sponsored plan. The moment we separated and he was motivated to hurt me, there was nothing legally stopping him from making changes to his benefits elections during an open enrollment window, or depending on the timing, from claiming a qualifying life event. Ms. Aldrich had seen it happen. A spouse drops a child from coverage as a pressure tactic. It causes chaos, it causes medical bills, it causes the other parent to fold. I enrolled my daughter in a marketplace plan the following week. I paid the first 3 months upfront out of a personal savings account I had opened in my own name after our first conversation with Miss Aldridge. She was covered before Aaron even knew I had spoken to a lawyer. I filed in March. He was served on a Tuesday morning at his office, which I had chosen deliberately. Miss Aldridge said I could request alternative service, but I said no. I had thought about this. I wanted him to receive those papers surrounded by his colleagues in the place where he had built his professional identity, where he believed himself to be respected and successful. I don't think that was petty. I think it was accurate. He called me 14 minutes after the process server left his building. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I let that go too. I drove our daughter to her pediatric dentist appointment and we talked about her favorite color the whole way there. She said it was rainbow, but mostly purple. His first attorney was a man named, I'll call him his first attorney, who sent a letter within the week demanding I return to the marital home, cease unauthorized access to financial accounts. I had not accessed any account I wasn't jointly named on, and agree to a temporary custody arrangement that would give Aaron primary residential parent status. That last part I had expected. Ms. Aldridge had warned me that some attorneys advise clients to preemptively seek custody as leverage. It's not about the children, she told me. It's about making the other spouse afraid. I was afraid. But I was also the one who had attended every pediatric appointment, every school intake meeting, every swim lesson, every sick day. I had the records to prove it. Appointment summaries, school communications, vaccination records. I had kept all of it organized in a binder that now sat in Ms. 9. Aldridge's file cabinet. The temporary orders hearing was in April. Aaron arrived with his attorney and a financial disclosure that listed his annual income at $94,000. I had documentation suggesting his actual earnings from the brokerage across reported and unreported sources were closer to $310,000. Ms. Aldrich submitted a formal request for financial discovery. Business records, tax returns, bank statements across all accounts, personal and professional, communications related to asset transfers. Aaron's attorney objected. The judge overruled the objection. Discovery was granted. I want to describe what those 3 months of discovery felt like from my side of it, because I think people imagine it as dramatic. It wasn't. It was tedious and methodical and sometimes deeply boring, and I was very good at it. The forensic accountant, Ms. Aldrich, retained a woman who had done this for 20 years and had the effect of someone doing a jigsaw puzzle, went through Aaron's business records and identified three primary vehicles he had used to minimize his visible income. The first was a management company he had created 18 months before we started having serious marital problems. He paid himself a modest salary through the main brokerage but funneled significant additional revenue through the management company, which technically provided consulting services to the brokerage. The management company had its own bank account. It had not been disclosed in his financial affidavit. The second was a series of deferred commissions, deals where he had structured payment timing to push income into future fiscal years, which would place it outside the marital period once we were divorced. This required coordination with a colleague whose name appeared repeatedly in the business email records. The third, and the one that I think finally landed for the judge, was the simplest. He had transferred $43,000 to a personal brokerage account in his name only, not the joint account, his name only, in 4 separate transactions over 8 months. When asked in his deposition why he had moved those funds, he said they were for investment purposes. When asked why he had not disclosed the account in his financial affidavit, he said he had forgotten about it. The forensic accountant had a word for what she found in his records. She called it intentional. She used that word several times in her report. Not oversight, not inconsistency, intentional. The deposition was in June. I wasn't present, my attorney handled it, but Miss Aldridge called me that evening and said his attorney looked like he was doing math he didn't want to do the whole time. I laughed for the first time in weeks. The final hearing was in September. I had not seen Aaron in person since his service in March, except briefly at the temporary custody exchange. He looked, I noticed, like someone who had spent 6 months being afraid. Thinner, less easy. The confidence that had once made him seem like the most interesting person in the room now read differently, like something he was performing rather than something he had. His second attorney. He had switched attorneys in July, gave a presentation that characterized his hidden assets as administrative miscommunication, and suggested my financial analysis was overwrought. She implied, without stating outright, that my background in financial auditing gave me an unfair advantage in compiling documentation, as though being competent was a form of misconduct. The judge was not moved. She cited the forensic accountant's report. She cited the management company that had not been disclosed. She cited the $43,000 transfer. She cited the deferred commissions. She found that Aaron had engaged in financial misconduct during the marriage by deliberately obscuring and diverting marital assets, and that this conduct would be factored significantly into the property division. I was awarded the house. We had purchased it jointly, and while Aaron had insisted for years that it was his, because the initial suggestion had been his, because his income had been larger, because he carried it in his head as his asset, both our names were on the deed and the mortgage. And the down payment had come from our joint savings, which had included my income from the 3 years I worked before leaving to raise our daughter. The court saw no ambiguity. I was awarded 65% of the combined marital assets, including the investment accounts and the equity Aaron had attempted to shield through the management company. The $43,000 that had been transferred was returned to the marital estate and divided accordingly. Child support was calculated on his actual income, not the $94,000 on his affidavit, but the figure the forensic accountant had reconstructed. The difference in monthly support was not small. Our daughter's health insurance was addressed in the final order. Erin was required to maintain coverage for her until she turned 18, or pay the equivalent cost toward her marketplace plan if he ever let employer coverage lapse. There was a provision for enforcement. Miss Martin Aldridge had made sure of it. He did not get primary residential parent status. We have shared parenting on a structured schedule, and I am the residential parent of record. The school is notified, the pediatrician's office is notified, the swim club is notified. He sees her on his scheduled days, and to his credit, those days he shows up. I am back at work, not at the same company. I took a position with a smaller firm that does compliance consulting, better hours, better flexibility for a single parent. My first week back, my new manager asked about a gap in my resume, and I said I had taken time to raise my daughter. She said, "Good for you," and moved on. It was such a small thing, it felt enormous. My daughter is 4.5 now. Last week, she told me that her favorite color had changed to just purple, not rainbow anymore. I told her that was a very grown up decision. She thought about it and said, "I know." Erin and I don't speak unless it's about her. We text. We are civil. I don't hate him the way I thought I would. I think I just finally see him clearly, which is something I couldn't do when I was inside the life we'd built together, because I was too close to it, and because I trusted him, and because love makes you look at certain numbers and decide not to look too hard. I know better now. I've always known how to find the gap. I just had to be willing to look. I think about the night I found those Venmo transfers a lot, not with anger anymore, more like the way you think about a moment when you almost stepped off a curb into traffic and didn't. The close call, the thing that woke you up. What Aaron didn't understand, what I think people like him really understand, is that the version of me he had decided I was, and the version of me that actually existed, were two completely different women. He saw someone who had stepped back from a career, who made school lunches and managed pediatric appointment calendars, and he concluded that I had become someone who wouldn't look too closely, someone who could be managed. That's a particular kind of arrogance, and I've learned it tends to carry its own consequences. Not because the universe is keeping score in any mystical sense, but because decisions made from that kind of arrogance are almost always sloppy. He moved $43,000 into a personal account and called it investment purposes. He forgot he had given me access to his business email 2 years earlier. He underestimated what I would do when I finally decided to look. I don't think I'm a special case. I think most people, given enough reason and enough time, are capable of more than whoever underestimated them believed. The question is whether you're willing to be honest with yourself first, about what you're looking at, about what the numbers actually say, about what you have been choosing not to see. That part is hard. It was hard for me. There were months in that marriage where I looked at certain things and decided the explanation was probably fine. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I was lucky to have what I had. Choosing to stop telling yourself those things, choosing to look clearly even when clarity is frightening, that takes something. It's not comfortable, but it's the only starting point that leads anywhere real. And then there's the part after the looking, which is the part nobody talks about much. You still have to do the work. You have to sit with the spreadsheets. You have to find the attorney and have the honest conversation and organize the binder and show up to the hearings and keep making your daughter's lunch in the middle of all of it, because she still needs to eat and her world still needs to feel normal even when yours doesn't. That sustained effort, not the dramatic moment of deciding to fight, but the months of quiet, unglamorous follow-through, that's what actually changes outcomes. Aaron's attorney called my documentation overwrought. I think she meant it as a criticism. I took it as confirmation that I had done it right. I'm not going to pretend the outcome fixed everything. Divorce is expensive in ways that don't show up in court orders, in energy, in your child's questions, in the particular loneliness of a Tuesday night when the house is too quiet. But I am on the other side of it, and my daughter is covered. And I went back to work and I know who I am in a way I'm not sure I did when I was inside that marriage, trying to make it make sense. What I carried off this wasn't just the house or the asset division. It was the understanding that integrity, Doing the right thing, even when it costs you, even when no one is watching, creates a kind of foundation that the other side of a courtroom cannot reach. Aaron built his case on concealment. I built mine on documentation. Only one of those holds up. My daughter told me last week that purple is her favorite color. Not rainbow anymore, just purple. I told her that was very grown up. She said, I know. I believed her.